Hello, everyone. I'm back today, and I'm joined by the director of Daniel's Gotta Die, right? That's Daniel's Gotta Die. And
It
it's
yeah, the title changed hands a couple times over its course, but that's the title right now.
and I'm joined by the director, Jeremy Lalonde. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So obviously your movie's gonna be premiering tonight from when we're doing this interview. Not tonight from when it comes out, but what made you decide to make this film?
I got sent this script from one of the producers, Leah Johnsons, and I'm, I'm not just a director. I also write a lot, and I typically write the stuff that I direct. But every now and then, someone sends me a script that just really hits me in the right spot, and I've always wanted to do like a really kind of dark, dysfunctional family movie. It's just one of those things that's been like in the back of my mind on my checklist. And so when Leah sent this over to me, it was like I went to bed with an idea and I woke up and like the magical shoe elves cobbled together the script. And I was like, oh wow, someone did all the work for me, you know? So it's kind of like a magical gift that got sent to me. And without giving away any spoilers, for what happens in the film and particularly the end, what I really loved about this story is that it kind of makes a commentary on family that's different than a lot of dysfunctional family movies. It doesn't necessarily have the same kind of ending that I think we're used to seeing from this genre, and that was really refreshing to me, and I thought probably a bit more honest for a lot of people's experiences when it comes to dysfunctional families, because I think most people, uh you know the message in most dysfunctional family movies is, at the end of the day, family is what matters the most, and you just find a way to come together. This movie doesn't necessarily travel that same path.
Yes, I, yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right with that. And the one interesting thing, I was kind of reading, various people on the internet, and and the one thing I noticed is a lot of people talk about this like about it's not a who done it movie, it's a who's gonna do it movie, right? And I thought that was like a very characterization of the movie. Now, what do you think about that? Is that something that you kind of thought about when you're kind of, you know, when this movie's kind of like where you kind of made that connection, or was that something that you
I
never
love
really thought
that.
about?
I wish I had that as part of my pitch. Is that who's gonna do it? That's instead of a who done, it's a who's gonna do it. I love that. I'm gonna steal that for our marketing materials. Um, it kind of, but that's kind of what it is too, right? It's not like a Knives Out, even though it shares some of the DNA of that. Where that one we're like almost witnessing the murder after the fact. Ours is a bunch of people who are poised to commit a murder, but are not good at it. That's
Yeah.
why it's a comedy, right? So that's why I love your description of the who's gonna do it, because it's more the mystery of like, are any of these people gonna actually be able to kill him, and how's it gonna go down? Because these people just seem like they're running around with no real plan, which for me is kind of the fun of it too. I think when we see these movies, it's like everyone's plans just come off so beautifully executed with nothing getting in the way sometimes. And I'm like, that's not real life either. It's messy, it's sloppy. And that's what I loved about it. A movie about a bunch of people who, are attempting to commit murder and none of them are good at it.
Right. So this movie obviously has the last performance of the legendary Bob Saget. He was, in my opinion, amazing in the film.
Thanks.
What was like, how do you kind of look back on that? And like, obviously I don't think you knew that would be his final performance at the time, but like now that you know it is, how does that kind of put everything he did in context, and what was it like working with him?
Oh God. I mean, it's heartbreaking now. I mean, the saddest part about it was that Bob was such a champion for this movie when we were making it, and after, and he desperately, I kept on trying to like offer him to see early cuts and whatnot. And even when we lost picture, he said, no, I want to see it when it's like done. And he passed away just before we finished it. So he never actually got to see the movie finished, because he was waiting for it to be all done with all the music and everything. So, it breaks my heart to know that Bob never got to see the movie. Um, but sorry, what would now I'm all torn up in that. What was the right ask your question again? I don't want to miss it.
It was mostly just like how does that put his performance into context, like when
Yeah.
you watch it back?
I mean, I think, I grew up with Bob as, the Bob from Full House, which I think a lot of us did, right? That was a lot of our first introduction was to Bob, but I think as we now know, Bob is so much more than that. Like, especially, the delight of me discovering his stand-up comedy years later and the delight of that, like the split side of that personality of the, America's father versus, America's dirty uncle, um, and that side of his humor, which is really who he is, um, was really exciting for me to play with because I'm like, that's the Bob Saget we wanted for this movie, right? The one
Right.
that is like no holds barred, but he still has that. You look at Bob and he's both of those things, right? And that's what's kind of fun about Bob. It's unassuming and unexpected. And he's just got the biggest heart. We made this movie during the height of COVID, and we were lucky enough to go to the Cayman Islands, a place that was basically open. We didn't have to wear masks. We didn't really have to socially distance. Although we did on set, we followed all the protocols that, even though it was weird, like we had to follow the protocols, even though in theory there was no reason to where we were, but because
Right.
nobody else in the world understood what that meant at that time, we just did it so nobody got in trouble. But you know, because it was just us on the island, this cast and crew, we like really became this family. And so like when we weren't on set, we were hanging out together, going grocery shopping, or hanging out down at the beach, or going out for dinner, or playing games or whatnot, right? It really was a different kind of experience than I think you get to do on most movies, because when you call rap on set, most people just go back to their, go home, or go back to their hotel, but nobody had families to go back to. We were all stuck together. So we got to, I got really close with Bob over the course of, we both prep and production. And then even after, I'd talk to him on the phone probably at least once a week. I talked to him 2 days before he passed away. And so when I got that call that he was gone, I thought it was a prank. I thought it was like, oh, this is just an internet hoax. He's fine. I talked to him 2 days ago. And then so it really it took a moment to kind of like accept that, and it's still hard to know that like it's not, he's never going to see it and see the love that he's going to get from it. But what I love about it is being his last performance, given that it has to be that, is that it really, it's a role that he really enjoyed doing. He had a lot of fun with it, but I think it also encapsulates a lot about him. It's funny, it's a bit dirty, but it's also got a heart. And I think that's the best way to describe Bob Saget, is a funny, dirty guy with a great big heart.
So this movie has, outside of Bob, a stacked cast in terms of just like comedy talent. Um, when you have that kind of talent in a movie, how much of it is, just performing based on the script versus just kind of them developing developing these characters and kind of going their own way with them?
Oh, I mean, it's always a little bit of both. Like, I think in comedy, I always tell my ADs and my producers, I'm like, make sure we schedule in some time for just fucking around, because that's how you discover some stuff, right? And play. I approach directing from a point of play. Like, I do extensive prep and whatnot, but when I show up on set that day, I've got that all in the back of my head and my notes, but I kind of want to see what happens, because so much about the chemistry between actors, and it's one thing for something to be on the page, but you've got to be reactive to it in the day. And if something doesn't quite land or work, well, then you're surrounded by a really talented group of people. And so you can like play with them and go, hey, that's not quite landing. What else can we do? Right. And luckily we had such a great script from Matthew Dressel that we already had like a great starting off point. But then for me, it's always like, great, we got that. What else do you want to try? What do you want to play with? Is there a moment here you want to dig into? Is there something that's not working that you want to cut out and then just try to tighten up? And so we'd always leave a little bit of room for that. And then also just leaving room for the actors to come in with their fresh ideas too. And we try to talk about that kind of stuff in prep. I'd let them know as soon as they were brought onto the movie. It's like, hey, we're open to play with things and try things, right? And try scenes in different ways and see what works. So it's a real mix of it. I always want to get the script, because the writer spent so much time on it, whether it's myself or not. But I also just want to like leave room for invention and spontaneity, because that's kind of what makes things alive. And you get a sense of that. And there's definitely, I couldn't tell you the percentage of how much is improvised versus how much is played. There's definitely lots of little moments from everyone where we just kind of found something and leaned into it and played a little bit, right? The movie, because of what the nature of it is so plotted, because it's so carefully constructed in terms of where are people and what's going on. So you can't reinvent the wheel entirely. It's not like you can suddenly take in a different direction. But in terms of just like little moments, nuances between characters, we really tried to find whatever we could inside of that and lean into those.
Now, what do you first of all, do you watch a lot of comedies outside of, the movies that you direct?
Hate comedy. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, for sure. I'm a fan of all genres. And that's why, I find in this film and other films I'm working on now, I'm really kind of like exploring not only comedy but outside of comedy. So this is, the first time I've kind of done like a hybrid comedy thriller. But
Right.
yeah, I'm a big fan of comedy, especially like the classic comedies that I grew up with and that came before my time. I find we're in a weird place of comedy right now because of just everything that's going on in the world, and sensitivities being a bit more acute than they were probably 10 years ago, and a lot of that's good.
Right.
Some people would argue there's been a bit of overcorrection where people feel like they can't say anything or make fun of anything. And I think part of that is necessary, but I also think part of comedy is dancing that line, you
Right.
know, and pushing boundaries and whatnot. Is I think Leah Johnson's our producer pointed out really well. Like the line we wanted to always draw with this film is that if we're making fun of something or group or whatever it is, it's like, are we punching up or are we punching down? And if we're
Right.
punching down, we don't want to do that. If we're punching up, like stupid characters making fun of themselves, or you can point at that person and be like, well, that's the voice of the idiot. Clearly, that's not our voice, right?
Right.
Because I think there's also too the difference between like the voice of the film and the filmmaker versus the voice of the characters,
Right.
right? And if the film is, you know, offensive intentionally versus a character saying something offensive because they're an idiot or because they're, someone who has that kind of point of view and the movie's aware of that but doesn't necessarily share it.
So, what do you think the fatal flaw, I guess, or one of the biggest flaws in comedies are, and comedy movies are, when you look at that, when you look at other movies, and then you look at what you guys did?
I mean, I think the general flaw in comedy is like when it doesn't have a heart. Like I think it's just like because there's nothing to care about. I think if it just is there to kind of amuse them itself as opposed to like comedy being part of the bigger story. I had this conversation. I teach directing at Toronto Film School every now and then, and we were talking about script analysis, and every scene has to be a turning point in the movie and for a reason for it to exist. And one of my students said, well, comedy is the exception, right? And I was like, no. I'm sure you could point to 1,000 examples where there's scenes in a movie that you could pull out and it wouldn't matter. And I'd argue you should have pulled that scene out,
Right.
because it's there to amuse the filmmakers themselves and it doesn't necessarily drive the story forward. I would argue it's just laziness too. It's like I would argue there's a way to keep that joke, make that work, and work it into a moment that moves the story forward, right? They shouldn't be one or the other. They need to be together. So I think with comedy, it's that, but it's also just I think comedy, unless comedy is a little bit dangerous, I don't think it's hard to make funny these days, right? Because I myself I laugh hardest when I'm surprised by something and I'm not expected by something, and that's really hard to do in comedy, right? We don't laugh at the same thing twice. you know.
Right.
You where in drama you can get people to cry at the same type of scene multiple times over different stories, but you can't set up and pay off the same type of joke more than once ever, you know. So
Right.
comedy is more challenging because it has to stay fresh to work, you know. It's not that, it's very akin to like horror and stuff. It's like people don't get scared by a kill they've seen before in a movie, or they're I've
Right.
seen that before. Saw did this, or whatever movie, or you know, whatever movie did that. And I think comedy is the same thing. It's like it constantly has to be reinvented and shifted over time. And I think, you know, what's happening right now with, you know, even though we've been living in it for a few years with cancel culture and whatnot, is everyone's scared of getting in trouble
Right.
and scared of like offending people. And I'm not saying everyone should go out there and try to offend people for shock value. I'm just saying I think people, comedy can't play it safe.
Right.
Um, you know, and so it's harder to do that now, but I don't think it's impossible.
Now, when you look at this movie, and I'm trying to walk a line here where I don't, give anything away about the movie, but when you look at the characters in the movie, there's so many of them, and I feel like the movie's almost too short to really, explore all of them in as much detail as someone in the audience may want. Especially because like they're all interesting characters. So was there are there any characters, or is there a character in your mind which you were kind of like, I wish we could have seen more or explored that character more?
I mean, I think, you know, my opinion of that is that's exactly what you want your audience to feel. You want them to want more,
Right.
right? If your audience walks away going, "Yeah, I got every single thing and I'm kind of exhausted a little bit," you probably had too much in there. So, what I want, you know, what would I want more of? I mean, I think probably just because I love him so much, and he is a little bit more of Dax Ravina's character, who is Carly Chaikin's boyfriend in the movie, who he just kind of pops up here and there, and you just get a little bit of him. But he's just such a got a great look and a great energy, and he's the one character you probably don't get enough of at all. And him, and also it's like, you know, if I was to go in and push more scenes of, I think the siblings we get lots of.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it would have been more of the supporting characters, more of Varun, you know, Varun, who plays Carter, um, and Chantal Riley, who plays Emily, his love interest. You know, if we were going, if someone was going to go in and was like, where can we expand? Like, those are the characters I'd probably want to dig into a bit more.
So do you want me to tell you who I was thinking of? Because I'm surprised he didn't say his name. Iggy Pop. Like,
Oh, Iggy's character. Yeah, that's a tricky one. There actually was another scene with Iggy in the movie, and it was just that classic sense of we want the movie to start faster.
right.
You know, it just felt like we were lingering off the beginning and the story just wasn't kicking into motion. For sure. You know, we talked about that too, is like, do we want to have flashbacks that include Iggy and the kids? I mean, at that point it was just the character. Uh and do we want to have more of Edward in the movie and seeing what their relationships were like before? But I love that. I love that you wanted more Iggy. Who doesn't want
I
more
was
Iggy?
I was like, when, like, how, like, you can't just put him in for like, the beginning and then not have him appear. And I was so disappointed by that. But I mean, obviously, it was a great movie still. But that was the one character I was like, what happened here?
Well, again, leave him wanting more. He does have a, you know, without spoiling too much, there are glimpses of him, you know, later on in the
Yeah.
film. So he's not just out at the beginning. And without spoiling anything, there's kind of a running theme that he might be there throughout the movie inside of another creature or object without ruining anything. You know, that was my philosophy, was that he reincarnated somehow in the movie and he's actually there the whole time. But I'll leave that to people after they watch the movie. They can ask me on the internet, and I can answer whether or not we have the same philosophy. That's just my personal feeling.
So, what do you do outside of directing? Like, what else do you like to do?
Oh, me? I mean, I'm a dad. I got two, you know, emerging teenagers. But I've also, during the pandemic, I went on this really big weight loss journey, and went like vegan, plant-based and whatnot. And it started this little YouTube channel that started to grow into a much bigger thing recently. So, I spend a lot of time with that and actually helping coach people with weight loss and their health, because I used to be twice the size I am now. And so that's one of the things that I've found has become like a much bigger part of my life, and I enjoy that. And really, it's like between that and family and filmmaking, it's pretty all consuming. That's about as much time I have time for. But I got a little group of friends that we play board games with, big strategy, nerdy board games. My son's starting to get into music now, so we'll jam a little bit. I've got a musical background, and he's pretty adept at it. And just other stuff, family stuff. Not super exciting.
So now, how does it feel? Obviously, your movie is premiering. I don't know if it's the Canadian to North American or whatever premiere of it is.
Yeah, we premiere our Canadian premiere was in Sudbury last month, so this is our Toronto premiere.
Toronto premiere. Okay. So how does it feel? Like you've done a whole bunch of premieres for this. How does it feel, that you're going to be having another one tonight?
You know what? To be honest with you, I'm so excited for tonight. First of all, we just found out it's sold out. So it's amazing. And they put Toronto After Dark in a big theater, so we're gonna have like 500 plus people watching the movie tonight, which is exciting. And also for me, like the challenge for making this movie was that we made it during COVID. And
Right.
my usual process in post-production for a film is to get a bunch of audiences and watch it with them and see how it feels with that audience, how they react. Is there a lull where I wasn't thinking there was a lull? Can we speed it up? Because I think we can do to it, right? I love to test it like that. And we couldn't. I never really got to watch this with a full audience. I think we were able to do it with like 20 people, and it with all spread out around this theater. And I'm like, that's not a way to watch a comedy. You can't
Right.
really get a sense of the energy that way. So, and then I didn't get to go to the premiere. Had the world premiere at Austin Film Festival last year, and I wasn't able to attend. And then we played at this comedy film festival in Monaco over the summer, and I got to go to that. But it was strange because it was English as a second language for most of those
Right.
people, and it was in subtitles. And so I didn't really get a sense of how it played there, because language in comedy is such a thing, right?
Right.
And even at our Sudbury premiere last month, I went, and my daughter came with me, and she got sick, and I stayed for the Q and for the intro, and then I had to leave because she was literally in the car holding like a bag, and we went home that night. So I still actually haven't watched it with a full big audience. Tonight will be my first time watching with an audience. So I'm so excited to see how it plays.
Yeah, it's gonna be because obviously when I watch it, I don't watch it with an audience. I watch it by myself. I'm actually really excited to watch it with an audience because I think it'll be. I feel like it'll be a different movie in so many ways when you watch it with other people than if you just watch it by yourself. Or you've watched obviously in groups of people, but I think that's going to be very interesting. Now, what are you kind of working on now, or what are your future plans?
Yeah, so what am I working on now? I've got a bunch of stuff in development. I don't know which ones I can talk about, which ones I can't. But I'm working on a horror film that is really interesting for me. It's my first time doing that. And then I've got a musical that I've been playing with for years and years and years, and we've had some development money for it. And so it's a bit bigger of a project, so those ones always take way longer to come together. And then I've got this little kind of coming of age love story film that I'm hopefully gonna shoot this spring if everything comes together. So I've got a bunch of things in the hopper, some in development, some a little bit further along. So yeah, I got nothing that I can get specific about just yet because I never want to jinx it. But I'm moving along. But I'm excited about exploring more genres and just kind of expanding what I do here at the same time.
So when you look at the movies that you look at the cast from this movie, is there, if you had to choose one person who you could work with again, only one, and it can't be Bob because I know that's going to be your answer. Um, who would it be?
Oh God, that's not fair. That's asking me to pick my kids. God,
Okay,
because
you
I
can
could.
give me two. You can give me two.
I mean, I would. Oh, can I have three?
Fine, I'll give you
That's
three.
even worse because then I'm only picking half of it. It's
That's what
almost
I'm giving you two, so you can say, okay, look, I could only
true.
pick two.
I mean, you know what? Maybe I'll stick with two. Jason Jones would be an easy answer. I'm not going to pick Jason because Jason's just so great. It's like he's an easy person because he's kind of like another actor I've worked with a lot, was Ennis Esmer, who it's like you just put them in a scene and they're magically going to become alive and they're great to work with. Two of the actors that I worked with in this that I would love to do more with is Chantel and Varun. Both great. And that's not to say I wouldn't want to work with all of them again, but I love those two. You know, it doesn't hurt that they're Canadian. You know, I love me my Canadian actors, but they're both like because I think it might just be because we were both from the same city, all of us, and we had more shared connections. But those are the people that I'm like, oh, I want to dig into more of what you're about and play in those things a bit more. So I think I'd pick those two. But that said, it's like a horribly cruel question. How dare you put me in that position? I love all of my cast equally, but gun to my head, I guess those are my picks.
I'm surprised you didn't say Carly, but I don't
Oh,
know. That was
Carly.
I
In
was
a
expecting
heartbeat.
that to be the answer.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's like that should be the answer because they're all great. Carly, I love Carly so much. Carly is so fierce and so awesome. And Carly is like that actor that just shows up on set so prepared and ready to work. Carly too. That's why it's a cruel question because the answer is all of them. But
So, oh,
I think you know what it is because tonight I'm meeting up with Chantel and Varun. We're gonna have dinner before the movie, and so I think they're on my brain.
that's fair. That can be the reason. Then you won't get anyone mad.
I
So
love Carly.
so then I guess the next, when you look at kind of this whole experience, right? What is your biggest takeaway, or what is the biggest thing you kind of learned about filmmaking that you didn't know before, or you didn't kind of realize before?
Ooh, that's a good one. What did I learn? And because I think that's for me, like that's kind of what I approach each project with is like I want to play more with this. I think for this one, I really, really wanted to, you know, I think one of the things I wanted to really delve into this was like, the question I asked myself as a filmmaker, I was like, what if Alfred Hitchcock made like a pure comedy? Like, what would that look like? um and just really wanting to explore that in terms of like the visual aspects and how music worked, right? And so I think what I really worked on in this film and I'm most proud of, on top of all the things I'm really happy with, is just how well that balanced and that collaboration with um the composers and our DP. Like really early on, we were talking about the music for this film, right? And how certain score pieces would work. And so really having that in my brain while we were shooting, like down to the rhythm of certain moments, so we could shoot it in a certain way. I think that's what I learned is that, you know, that kind of stuff can work if you plan it well, right? And just the technical aspects and just blending that all. So I think that's kind of what I walked away from, was just like a greater appreciation that, if I put that effort into the technical aspects, I can make them work.
Right. So now there's something which we started to do, and I want to know how you would kind of characterize your films, or how would you pitch it, how you would pitch it to audiences. And so what I'm going to ask you is I'm going to ask you for three movies which you feel like your film takes elements from. So like basically, if you're a fan of these three movies, you're going to love this movie. And by this
Oh,
movie, I mean Daniel's Gotta Die.
sure. I'd say Knives Out. If you're a fan of the more modern ones, I'd go with. I mean, I don't know which Hitchcock I'd pick off the top of my head. I almost want to say, and then I'm trying to think of a good dysfunctional family movie that I liked. That I think it's more of those genres. It's more like I'd say Knives Out specifically, but also if you're a fan of Hitchcock and a fan of like dysfunctional family movies, I think that's the right blend.
Are you thinking of Dial M for Murder as the Hitchcock movie?
Not Dial M because that's so contained. I'm thinking of the one with Jimmy Stewart's in it. No, it's Cary Grant. It's where I stole. There's a section in the movie with a glass of milk that's very illuminated, and I literally stole that from Hitchcock. The idea of this glass. And I'm not gonna remember it off the top of my head without looking at a list, and I don't
North
want
by Northwest?
not by. Oh, I wish North by Northwest. No, that one is pure like that's almost like the precursor to James Bond. That movie. God, if I could make that movie. Yeah, it's notorious for sure.
Oh, that's that's interesting.
That one. But again, not the comedy aspects, just more like the tone and the mood, like that vibe. Because it
Right.
really is like a bit of a mashup of genre here, right? It's like, dumb comedy with dysfunctional family with, you know, thrillery kind of Hitchcockian overtones.
Well, with that being said, I want to thank you for your time. I know you have to get ready to head out to Scotiabank for the movie's Toronto premiere. And do you have anything else you want to promote to our audience, social media, anything else?
No, I'll give a shout out to like, Canadian films. Go watch more of our Canadian films by whether it's myself or another Canadian filmmaker. Add that to your rotation and your palette of films.
Yeah, we've talked to a lot of Canadian filmmakers. So,
Oh,
and we can tell you they're all amazing. They all have amazing projects and all very, very underrated projects, which, we don't talk about enough. With that being said, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk to us today. And thank thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.